What you are about to hear will shake your faith in what you think you know about love and money. Jasper Blackwood was worth $3 billion and had everything money could buy, but he was about to lose it all in one night. Then a 25-year-old black waitress named Serenity looked him straight in the eye and said 4 words that changed everything. What she told him was so powerful that it not only saved his empire, but made him realize he had been living his whole life wrong. This is not just a story about money or success. This is about how one moment of truth from the most unlikely person can transform 2 lives forever. Get ready to believe in miracles again, because this love story will prove that sometimes the poorest person in the room is actually the richest. Jasper Blackwood sat in his glass office on the 47th floor of the Blackwood Tower in Manhattan, staring at the city lights below. At 32 years old, he was one of the youngest billionaires in America. His technology company had made him rich beyond his wildest dreams. He owned houses in 5 countries, drove cars worth more than most people's homes, and wore watches that cost more than college educations. But tonight, none of that mattered. In exactly 6 hours, his business partners were going to vote him out of his own company. The board meeting was scheduled for 8 a.m., and Jasper knew he had lost. His former best friend, David Chun, had been secretly buying shares and convincing other board members that Jasper was too young and reckless to run a $3 billion company. The irony was bitter, because David had been Jasper's roommate in college when they were both broke and dreaming of success. Now David wanted everything Jasper had built. Jasper had spent 3 days calling everyone he knew, begging for support, offering deals, even threatening lawsuits. Nothing worked. By morning, he would be voted out as CEO and lose control of Blackwood Tech, the company he had started in his garage 7 years ago. Jasper looked at his phone and saw 47 missed calls from reporters who had somehow learned about tomorrow's vote. His hands shook as he poured another glass of whiskey. He had not slept in 3 days. His assistant had quit yesterday, saying she could not watch him destroy himself. His girlfriend Victoria had broken up with him last week, admitting she was only with him for his money and that David had offered her more. Jasper felt completely alone in his glass tower, surrounded by everything money could buy, but with no one who truly cared about him. He thought about his parents who had died in a car accident 5 years ago. They had been simple people who ran a small diner in Ohio. His father always said, "Son, money doesn't make you rich. Love makes you rich." Jasper had thought his father was just being sentimental. Now sitting in his empty office worth millions of dollars, he finally understood what his father meant. But it was too late. By tomorrow evening, the business magazines would be writing about his fall from grace. The boy genius who built an empire would become the cautionary tale about pride and betrayal. At 2 a.m., Jasper could not stand being alone anymore. He took the elevator down to the parking garage and got into his McLaren sports car. He drove through the empty streets of New York with no destination in mind. The city that had made him rich now felt cold and hostile. Every building reminded him of deals he had made, people he had trusted, dreams he had chased. He thought about driving to the airport and flying to one of his houses in Europe. He could disappear and start over somewhere else. But even as he considered it, Jasper knew he could never run away. This company was his life's work, his father's dream come true, his mother's pride and joy. He would rather fight and lose everything than give up without trying one last time. As he drove past Central Park, Jasper saw a small 24-hour diner that reminded him of his parents' restaurant in Ohio. On impulse, he pulled over and parked. The diner was called Hope's Kitchen and had warm yellow lights that made it look welcoming in the dark city. Jasper had not eaten real food in days, surviving only on coffee and whiskey. Maybe a simple meal would help him think clearly about his impossible situation. The diner was almost empty, except for a few truck drivers and night shift workers. Jasper walked in wearing his expensive suit and Italian shoes, looking completely out of place among the working-class customers. Behind the counter was a young black woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. Her name tag said Serenity, and she looked to be about 25 years old. Her uniform was clean but worn, and she moved with the grace of someone who took pride in her work no matter how humble it might seem. "Good evening, sir. You're out late," she said as Jasper sat at the counter. Her voice was gentle and genuine without the fake politeness he was used to from people who wanted something from him. "Coffee, please, and whatever you recommend for food," Jasper replied, surprised by how normal it felt to have a simple conversation. Serenity poured him coffee in a white ceramic mug that was chipped but clean. "Honey, you look like you haven't eaten in days. Let me make you our special meatloaf with mashed potatoes. My grandmother's recipe. It'll stick to your ribs and warm your heart." Jasper nodded, realizing he could not remember the last time someone had called him honey or worried about whether he was eating enough. As Serenity cooked his food, Jasper watched her work. She moved with purpose and care, treating each dish like it mattered. She hummed softly as she cooked, and Jasper found the sound oddly comforting. When she brought his plate, the food smelled like his childhood, like his mother's cooking, like home. "There you go, sugar. Eat up," Serenity said. "And if you don't mind me saying, you look like a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders." Jasper took a bite of the meatloaf and was surprised by how delicious it was. "This is incredible," he said. "Thank you. And you're right. I am carrying a heavy load tonight." Serenity refilled his coffee and leaned against the counter. "I've been working nights for 3 years, and I can tell when someone's heart is breaking. You want to talk about it? Sometimes talking to a stranger helps more than talking to people who know you." Jasper looked into her honest brown eyes and felt something he had not experienced in years. Here was someone offering to listen, not because she wanted something from him, but because she genuinely cared about a fellow human being in pain. "I'm about to lose everything I've worked for," Jasper said quietly. "Years ago, I started a company with my best friend. We were both broke college kids with big dreams. I put everything into building this business. Worked 20-hour days, missed birthdays and holidays, sacrificed relationships and friendships. The company became worth billions. But somewhere along the way, my best friend decided he wanted it all for himself. Tomorrow morning, he's going to take everything from me." Serenity listened without judgment, occasionally nodding to show she understood. When Jasper finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that caught him completely off guard. "Sugar, can I ask you something? When was the last time you were truly happy? Not proud of an achievement or excited about making money, but genuinely happy in your soul?" Jasper opened his mouth to answer, but realized he could not. He thought back through years of success, awards, magazine covers, and business victories. In all of that success, when had he felt the simple joy he saw in Serenity's eyes as she hummed while cooking? When had he felt the satisfaction she seemed to find in making a perfect cup of coffee or ensuring a customer felt cared for? "I can't remember," Jasper admitted. "I thought success would make me happy. I thought having more money than I could ever spend would give me peace. But the higher I climbed, the lonelier I became. The more I achieved, the more people wanted to take it from me. I built an empire, but I lost myself somewhere in the process." Serenity nodded knowingly. "My grandfather used to say that climbing a mountain is easy compared to figuring out why you wanted to climb it in the first place. Maybe losing this company isn't your punishment. Maybe it's your liberation." Her words hit Jasper like lightning. "What do you mean?" he asked. Serenity smiled, and Jasper noticed how beautiful she was. Not in the artificial way of the wealthy women he usually dated, but in a natural, radiant way that came from inner peace. "Honey, what if tomorrow isn't about losing everything? What if it's about getting back everything that really matters? Your company made you rich, but did it make you a good person? Did it teach you how to love? Did it show you how to find joy in simple things? Did it help you build relationships that matter more than money?" Jasper sat in stunned silence as Serenity's words sank in. She continued, "I make $8 an hour plus tips at this diner. I live in a tiny apartment in Queens with my little sister who I'm putting through nursing school. I ride the subway to work and buy my clothes at thrift stores. By your standards, I'm poor. But you know what? I wake up every morning grateful for my life. I love my customers. I'm proud of my work. And I sleep peacefully every night knowing I've helped people feel a little less alone in this big city. Can you say the same about your billions?" Jasper felt tears forming in his eyes. This young woman, who had never owned anything valuable, was teaching him about true wealth. "I've been so focused on winning that I forgot why I started the company in the first place," he whispered. "My parents owned a small diner like this one. They were never rich, but they were the happiest people I knew. They taught me that business should be about serving others, not just making money. Somewhere along the way, I lost that vision. Serenity reached across the counter and gently touched his hand. "It's not too late to remember who you really are," she said. "Maybe your friend is doing you a favor. Maybe losing this company will help you find something much more valuable." Jasper looked into her eyes and felt something shift inside his heart. "What would you do if you were me?" he asked. Serenity smiled. "I'd walk into that meeting tomorrow with my head held high. I'd tell them the truth about what kind of leader you want to be, and if they vote you out, I'd thank them for setting you free to build something even better, something that your parents would be proud of, something that makes you as happy as I am cooking meatloaf at 3 a.m. for strangers who need a friend." Jasper sat with her words as the sun began to rise over Manhattan. For the first time in days, he felt hope instead of despair. This beautiful, wise woman had shown him that losing everything might actually mean gaining everything that truly mattered. As he prepared to face the most important day of his life, Jasper realized that whether he kept his company or lost it, he had already found something infinitely more precious. He had found someone who saw the man behind the money, someone who could love him for who he was rather than what he owned. The board meeting was set to begin in 2 hours, and Jasper knew exactly what he was going to do. But first, he had something much more important to take care of. He looked at Serenity, who was cleaning tables and preparing for the morning rush, and he knew that whatever happened with his company, his real journey was just beginning. "Serenity," he said, "would you have dinner with me tomorrow night somewhere much fancier than this diner?" She laughed, and the sound was like music. "Honey, I'd love to have dinner with you, but let's make it somewhere exactly like this diner. Fancy restaurants make me nervous, and I have a feeling you need to remember how good simple things can taste." Jasper smiled wider than he had in years. "It's a deal," he said. "And Serenity, thank you for saving my life tonight." She winked at him. "Sugar, I have a feeling you're about to save your own life. I just reminded you how." As Jasper walked toward the door, ready to face whatever the day would bring, he realized that win or lose, he had already won the only thing that really mattered. He had found love, and more importantly, he had found himself. The story that began with a man about to lose everything had become the story of a man about to gain everything worth having. That it all started with a black waitress who had the courage to tell a white billionaire the truth about what makes life worth living. 6 months later, Jasper and Serenity stood together in the same diner where they had met. But everything had changed in the most beautiful way possible. Jasper had indeed lost his company that morning, just as he had expected. But instead of begging or fighting, he had stood before the board and delivered a speech that moved several members to tears. He told them about his parents' diner, about losing sight of his values, and about learning the difference between success and happiness. He wished them well and walked away with dignity. 3 weeks later, using the money from selling his shares, Jasper opened a chain of diners called Hope's Kitchen. In honor of both the place where he met, Serenity, and his parents' memory, each diner employed people from struggling communities and served simple, delicious food at prices everyone could afford. Serenity became his business partner and later his wife, and together they built something more valuable than his first company had ever been. They built a business based on love, service, and the belief that everyone deserves good food and kindness, regardless of how much money they have. Their story became legendary in New York, proving that sometimes losing everything is the first step toward gaining everything that truly matters. And every night, when they closed the last diner and went home to their small apartment that they chose to keep despite their success, Jasper would tell Serenity the same thing. "Thank you for showing me that the richest person in the room is always the one with the biggest heart." Their love story had transformed not just their own lives, but the lives of everyone who walked into their diners looking for more than just a meal and found hope, kindness, and proof that the American dream is alive. And well, for those brave enough to redefine what success really means, the journey from that first night to their wedding day was filled with challenges that tested their love and commitment. When Jasper first approached Serenity about becoming his business partner, she was hesitant. "Honey, I appreciate the offer, but I don't know anything about running a business," she had said. Jasper smiled and replied, You know the most important thing about business, which is how to treat people with love and respect. Everything else we can figure out together. Their first Hope's Kitchen opened in Harlem 6 weeks after Jasper lost Blackwood Tech. The small storefront was nothing like the glass towers Jasper was used to, but it felt more like home than any office he had ever occupied. Serenity insisted on keeping the same warm yellow lights and checkered tablecloths that had made the original diner so welcoming. She trained the staff personally, teaching them that every customer who walked through the door was family. "We're not just serving food," she would tell new employees. "We're serving hope to people who might not find it anywhere else." Jasper watched her work with the staff and fell in love with her all over again. She had a gift for seeing potential in people that others had given up on. Their second location opened in Brooklyn 3 months later, followed by one in Queens, then the Bronx, and eventually Manhattan. Each new diner was staffed with people from the local community, many of whom had struggled to find steady work. Jasper and Serenity created a program where employees could earn management training and eventually open their own franchises. They also started a scholarship fund for employees' children to attend college. The media began calling it the Hope's Kitchen miracle as unemployment dropped in neighborhoods where new diners opened. But for Jasper and Serenity, the real miracle was much simpler. It was the smile on a homeless veteran's face when he realized he could afford a hot meal and be treated with dignity. It was the single mother who worked double shifts knowing her children had a safe place to get homework help in the back booth. It was the elderly widower hour who came in every Tuesday because Serenity remembered that he liked his coffee extra strong and his eggs over easy. These moments reminded them daily why they had chosen love over profit, service over success. The challenges came too, testing their relationship, in ways that money and power never could. There were nights when they stayed up, until dawn trying to figure out how to pay suppliers, while still keeping prices low enough for their customers. There were disagreements about expansion, plans with Jasper wanting to grow faster and Serenity insisting they maintain quality over quantity. There was the week when 3 different diners had equipment break down and they spent their savings fixing everything while still paying their employees. During these difficult times, Jasper learned that building something with love was much harder than building something for money, but it was also infinitely more rewarding. When Forbes magazine wanted to feature their story, Jasper and Serenity decided together to decline. "We're not building Hope's Kitchen for fame," Serenity explained to the disappointed reporter. "We're building it for the grandmother who needs affordable medication and can only eat 1 meal a day. We're building it for the college student who works 3 jobs and still can't make ends meet. Fame won't feed them, but good food and fair prices will." Their personal relationship deepened as their business grew. Jasper proposed to Serenity on a cold December evening in the original Hope's Kitchen where they had met. He had closed the diner early and filled it with candles and flowers. When Serenity arrived for what she thought was a business meeting, she found Jasper waiting with a ring he had designed himself. The diamond was small by his former standards, but it was set in a band made from recycled metal from his father's old diner equipment. "Serenity," he said, getting down on one knee among the empty tables and chairs that had become their second home. "You saved my life when I thought it was over. You taught me that wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives we touch and the love we give. Will you marry me and keep teaching me how to be the man my parents raised me to be?" Through happy tears, Serenity said yes, and the small group of employees they had invited to witness the proposal cheered and cried with them. They were married 6 months later in Central Park with their entire Hope's Kitchen family in attendance. Instead of an expensive reception, they hosted the celebration at their flagship location in Harlem, serving the same meatloaf and mashed potatoes that had brought them together. As their second anniversary approached, Jasper and Serenity reflected on how completely their lives had transformed. They now employed over 300 people across 15 Hope's Kitchen locations, and each restaurant was profitable while still maintaining their commitment to affordable prices and community service. Serenity's sister, Destiny, had graduated nursing school with honors and now worked at a hospital in Queens thanks to the support systems Kitchen had provided. David Chun, Jasper's former friend who had stolen Blackwood Tech, had been exposed for financial fraud and lost everything. But Jasper felt no satisfaction in his former friend's downfall. Instead, he and Serenity sent David a card offering him a job at Hope's Kitchen when he got out of prison. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting, Serenity had explained when Jasper questioned the gesture. It's about choosing love even when someone doesn't deserve it. That's what you taught me, and that's what I want to teach others. Their marriage had become a partnership in every sense, with each bringing their unique strengths to both their relationship and their business. The most meaningful measure of their success wasn't found in financial statements or newspaper articles. It was in the letters they received from customers whose lives had been touched by Hope's Kitchen. There was Miguel, the construction worker who met his future wife while both were eating alone at the Queens location. There was Mrs. Patterson, the retired teacher who started volunteering to tutor children at the Harlem Diner and found new purpose in her golden years. There was James, the former gang member who started as a dishwasher and worked his way up to assistant manager, breaking the cycle of violence in his family. These stories filled several albums in Jasper and Serenity's home, reminding them daily that their decision to choose love over money had ripple effects they could never have imagined. Every Christmas, they hosted a free dinner at all 15 locations for anyone who needed a meal and companionship. Volunteers from the community helped serve and local musicians performed. These celebrations became neighborhood traditions that brought people together across racial and economic lines. On their third wedding anniversary, Jasper and Serenity made an announcement that surprised everyone who knew them. They were opening Hope's Kitchen University, a culinary school that would train young people from underserved communities in cooking, restaurant management, and entrepreneurship. The school would be tuition-free with students working in Hope's Kitchen locations as part of their education. Graduates would be guaranteed jobs in the Hope's Kitchen system or receive support to start their own restaurants. We've learned that feeding people's bodies is important, but feeding their dreams is even more powerful, Serenity explained at the press conference. This school will give young people the tools to build their own successful futures. The first class of 30 students included teenage mothers, former inmates, high school dropouts, and immigrants who had been working minimum-wage jobs with no advancement opportunities. Jasper taught business classes while Serenity led cooking workshops. But their most important lessons were about treating others with dignity and finding joy in service. The opening of Hope's Kitchen University caught the attention of other business leaders who had been inspired by Jasper and Serenity's story. A former tech executive in California started a similar program for teaching coding skills. A retired banker in Chicago opened a financial literacy center in low-income neighborhoods. A Hollywood producer created a film school for inner-city kids. The Hope movement, as media called it, spread across the country as successful people chose to use their resources for community building rather than personal wealth accumulation. Jasper and Serenity were invited to speak at conferences and universities, but they always insisted on bringing their students and employees to share their stories, too. The real heroes aren't the people who write checks, Jasper would tell audiences. The real heroes are the single mothers working 2 jobs to support their families, the immigrants learning English while building new lives, the young people who refuse to let their circumstances define their futures. We're just here to provide them with opportunities to show the world how amazing they already are. Years after that life-changing night in the diner, Jasper and Serenity's influence extended far beyond New York City. Hope's Kitchen had expanded to 50 locations across 10 states, each one adapted to serve local tastes while maintaining the core values of affordability, quality, and community connection. The culinary school had graduated 200 students, with 95% finding employment or starting their own businesses. More importantly, crime rates had dropped in neighborhoods surrounding Hope's Kitchen locations. High school graduation rates had increased, and local property values had stabilized as communities became more cohesive. Urban planning professors studied the Hope's Kitchen effect and government. Officials visited to understand how private businesses could drive positive social change. But Jasper and Serenity remained, focused on the individual relationships that made their work meaningful. They still worked regular shifts at the original Harlem location, greeting customers by name and remembering their usual orders. Their greatest joy came from watching their employees grow and succeed. Maria, who had started as a shy cashier afraid to speak English in front of customers, now managed 3 locations and was planning to open her own restaurant in her hometown in Mexico. Tony, a former drug dealer who had served time in prison, became their head of security and developed programs to help other ex-offenders reintegrate into society. Kaisha, a single mother of 3 who had been living in a shelter when Serenity hired her, now owned her own catering business and employed 15 people. These success stories multiplied across every Hope's Kitchen location, creating networks of support and opportunity that transformed entire communities. Jasper often said that his greatest business achievement wasn't building a $3 billion company, but watching a minimum wage worker become a successful entrepreneur while maintaining their compassion and integrity. As they prepared for their 5th anniversary celebration, Jasper and Serenity announced their most ambitious project yet. They were donating $10 million to establish the Hope Foundation, which would provide microloans and business mentoring to aspiring entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. The foundation would also fund community centers in underserved neighborhoods, offering job training, child care, health services, and educational programs. Money is like water, Serenity explained to the foundation's first board meeting. If you hoard it, it becomes stagnant and useless. If you let it flow to where it's needed most, it brings life and growth wherever it goes. The foundation's motto became, "Every dream deserves a chance." And within its first year, it had helped launch 100 new businesses and created 500 jobs. The foundation also established the Blackwood Hope Scholarship Program, named after Jasper's parents, providing full college scholarships to children of Hope's Kitchen employees. Their love story had become a symbol of hope for millions of Americans who felt left behind by an economy that seemed to reward greed over generosity. Jasper and Serenity received thousands of letters from people who had been inspired to volunteer in their communities, start their own social enterprises, or simply treat others with more kindness in their daily lives. They had proven that success could be measured not just in dollars earned, but in lives changed, community strengthened, and hope restored. Their marriage had weathered the challenges of building a business together, raising Serenity's younger sister after their mother became ill, and navigating the pressures of public attention. Through it all, they had maintained the simple values that brought them together, choosing love over fear, service over selfishness, and community over competition. Every morning, they still started their day with coffee and chipped ceramic mugs, and every evening they ended it by sharing 3 things they were grateful for. These rituals kept them grounded in the midst of their growing influence and reminded them that happiness came from appreciating simple moments together. Looking back on that desperate night when Jasper had wandered into Hope's Kitchen, both he and Serenity marveled at how completely their lives had been transformed by one honest conversation between strangers. What had started as a chance encounter had become a love story that inspired millions, a business model that proved profit and purpose could coexist, and a movement that was changing how Americans thought about success and community. They had learned that losing everything could be the first step toward gaining everything worth having, that true wealth was measured in relationships rather than bank accounts, and that the most powerful force for change in the world was simply choosing to treat others with love and respect. Their story proved that the American dream was alive and well, not just for those born into privilege, but for anyone willing to work hard, treat others fairly, and believe that everyone deserves a chance to succeed. And it all began with a black waitress who had the courage to tell a white billionaire that the richest person in the room is always the one with the biggest heart.